Hey there, everyone. This is Benjamin Forney over at Heterodox Vigor. And today, actually, two stories today. We already went ahead and went through another story earlier today, and that will be on the playlist. Um, as far as what we're doing now, this is actually back to the Bible. It's a story that I find much misunderstood in terms of where its deeper message and importance lies. A lot of the time, people get caught up in the scandalous elements of it and kind of miss the story for the scandal. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little review of the story here, and then we'll get into the meanings behind it. So the idea with Onan, in a nutshell, was so back in Hebrew society at the time, there was a family social obligation. As part of society, you had certain expectations as a member of a family. In the same way that people might expect you to, I don't know, like feed your kids and keep them from stealing your neighbor's stuff, like, that sort of obligation, right? Except that in their particular culture, one of those obligations was if a man is married but does not yet have an heir and he dies, his brother is responsible for marrying the widow, fathering a child with the widow, which then counts as the child of the dead son, right? Of the deceased son. And carries on the line of the deceased son, not of the actual literal sperm donor, right? Because literal sperm donor is doing so in their role as also a child of the same parents, right? A brother, passing on as similar as genetic material as possible as his brother could have provided to, give him an heir, to give him someone to carry on his legacy, the legacy of his household, which, in case it isn't clear, I mean, that guy's not around anymore to care, but who is his widow. And so really it was socially owed as an obligation to his widow that this guy's brother go ahead and marry her, um, let her conceive a child, which requires certain actions, right? And that it would count not as his child, but his brother's child. And the Bible doesn't give us that much insight into this guy's direct psychology, but we do know his actions. And what were his actions? His actions were to intentionally take steps to not provide his brother's widow with the child that he socially was obligated to provide for her. It was his role, it was his duty to provide her with an heir, for his brother. That's what he owed the memory of his brother, but just as importantly, that's what he owed her, right? And so what did he do? He intentionally tried to deprive her of what was owed to her. In this case, what he was obligated to provide to her. He intentionally, as they say, spilled his seed upon the ground rather than impregnating her. So he was very purposely trying to not get her pregnant. Now, the reliability of the method is not the point at all here. They had less reliable methods. They didn't have science. That's not where we're judging this story from at all, as far as I'm concerned. Where we are judging it from is he had a social obligation. I mean, it's that simple. He had one. He chose to shirk it. You know, is this it was basically the same as if he cheated on his taxes, except he didn't owe it to some big nebulous organization like the government. He owed it to someone who was depending, both socially and literally, on his help. And so, I mean, he didn't like let her starve or anything, but what was he supposed to be doing? He was supposed to be providing her with an heir. What was he actually doing? He was taking affirmative steps to not provide her with an heir. Okay. So really, that right there is the base level of the story. And again, other videos I'll probably go into other aspects of it, because there are definitely other values and ideas and lessons to be found there, but that's the base level. This actually was a story in a way of envy, that when this guy was upset because, you read between the lines the most likely motivations of this guy. He was upset because the son would count as his brother's instead of his. It wouldn't really be his kid. And he got mentally fixated on that, and for whatever the reason, made him angry to where he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to go through with it, to the point where, again, he didn't just like slack, like do nothing. No, he affirmatively went through the motions, but deceptively took steps. So he was taking steps not just to not do what he had a duty to do. He was taking steps to fraudulently cook the books and show that, like, he was trying to do what it was that he's supposed to be doing. Oh, yeah. So this is also a story of dishonesty on the part of Onan, right? So when people are like, "Oh, look at this guy, he's out here," the salacious elements, he's out here, messing with his junk and putting his bodily fluids in places, and it's like, okay, yeah, no, actually, that's the whole point, is that he only put his bodily fluids somewhere to keep them from doing anything particularly efficacious, like meaningful, right? That was the point, was that instead of applying his efforts towards the productive thing that other people needed him to do, what did he do? He purposely cooked the books to show like he was putting in the effort, and then purposely wasted the time, purposely made sure that nothing would be accomplished. It's almost like he's some sort of a, industrial espionage spy sabotage or something, like, oh no, we can't let this societally necessary process go on. No. So that really is, to me, like the message of the story of Onan, was rather than doing something that needed done for society, for social obligations, for familial obligations, like that was his family, it was his responsibility, it wasn't someone else's responsibility to get that done for his family, right? And again, like, it's snicker lines, because it's like, oh yeah, gotta make the baby gravy. Yeah, no, listen, that's not where the story is. That's a distraction. Yes, it's true. It happens to involve impregnating and not impregnating. Yeah, no. The real story there is he had a duty, and he intentionally shirked his duty in a way that was wasteful. Like, it wasn't even like he was somehow like secretly benefiting. No, he literally was just shirking his duty, and then covering it up, being deceptive, etc. To some extent. And that's the thing, is, to some extent, because at some point or another, when she finds out, like, what's she gonna do to stop him? Nothing. So no. And that's why I brought up the story, is because at the end of the day, it is very much a lesson about, and I say a lesson about because it's rough, right? Because, well, what's the lesson, Ben? Like, just do whatever society wants you. Well, no, that's obviously not the lesson. No, I think the lesson is much more that people can sometimes be very wrong-headed, and I think that there's times that you have to step in and like ask them to get some perspective, right? Because if most of us, if we could sit down and have a conversation with Onan, we would be like, hey, bro, check it out. You do not understand the mistake that you're making. You're making such an epic mistake. Your name is going to be associated with what you're doing to avoid your duties right now. Like, do you understand that? Like, how bad would this duty be if you actually, hey, let's actually try to get her pregnant, just, because. And once you give your brother an heir, like, you can move on with your life. And chances are, I mean, unless you're infertile, which, frankly, then you're wasting your time with these other steps you're taking to not have kids, right? So, at some point or another, we should kind of, we can't go back and save Onan, and who cares, because he's a guy in a story. But when we have people that we care about in our lives that are perhaps about to make such mistakes, like, we can say, hey, bro, what you doing? What are the costs? Right? What are you benefiting out of this? And when you realize that there's stuff, again, if they're doing something to no benefit to themselves and it's just out of basically spite or envy or something, like, that's the point where you need to put them, point them towards their own self-interest. Say, well, what are you actually trying to get out of life? What are you trying to get accomplished? What do you want? What do you want your future to be like? Behave in that way. And sometimes that's gonna mean being nice to people you don't like, giving something of value to someone that you don't like because you have a reason to do it, whether it's a social obligation or whether it's just an opportunity for a good trade of some sort. For instance, at work, I have plenty of social obligations, and there's actually one employee in particular that I'm not a fan of. And for that exact reason, I go out of my way to be a little bit extra nice to them because I want to not be even accused of being mean, rude, or in any way harmful towards this person who I'm not a fan of. If I was a little bit more short-sighted on that and I just felt how acted how I felt towards this person, or if I took sabotaging moves of some sort, like, oh, this person is in charge, so I'm going to behave this differently during my work shift that'll reflect poorly on them. No, absolutely not. That's a bad approach, right? And that is really why I wanted to bring it up, is because I think that this type of dishonesty about social obligation and family obligation is a huge source of problems. And I don't think that it's going to get untangled anytime soon, but I do think that it benefits us to be aware of it, and to be thoughtful about it, right? This isn't a problem that's going away. This isn't a problem that oh, take these 3 steps and we'll fix up this problem in your life, right? It is a constant choice as you're going through life. Are the things that I'm doing right now, are they A, meeting my obligations, and B, orienting me in the direction that I want for the future? And like, so let's flip that back again. We'll probably talk about it some other week in depth, but what was kind of the other side that people get out of the Onan story? What they get is, oh yeah, don't mess with your junk. Yeah, man, that's what he did bad, was he spilled his seed upon the ground where it didn't make babies. So anytime you're spilling your seed upon the ground where it's not making babies, like even in a condom or whatever, then that's like It's like against God and stuff. No, no. No. You're getting my take on that is that the people that take that view are going way too literal and not looking at the figurative message, metaphorical message behind it. I think that my perspective on that was that Onan's real sin in the narrow sense was definitely, again, like by failing his duty, he failed to provide the heir to his dead brother's widow, right? So that is directly a harm from him to her in that sense. But also in the big picture, when you think about our obligations and duties, um most of us have some level of big picture obligation that we see, whether it is to God or humanity or something like that, or even just to your higher self, however it is that you model that in your own head. You have a reason why you act. You have a standard about how you're willing to act. I hope so, or else you're pretty damn lost if you don't have standards that are yours on how you're willing to act or not. And again, if you slavishly copy them from a holy book, like, as long as you are confident in your mind that when you act according to those, then you're being as ethical or as moral as you know how, good. That's the idea, is that you want to apply study towards different ways of behaving towards people until you're pretty confident about what types of approaches and what types of goals are going to be aiming towards, and then study up on those, get good at them, get practiced at them, use them in your life, talk to people who share common interests in trying to behave better in the world on what those ideas are. By the way, I talk about that somewhat. One of my buddies, Carson Hughes, man, that's a lot of what that guy talks about, is like the principles on which how we should behave in the world, even though a lot of it, not all of it, a lot of it is definitely focused around all the majority of the animals that aren't humans, right? I do think that there's definitely room for both basic and advanced levels of that too, right? I would hope that like, listening to me make a video about the golden rule or something would hopefully take someone who had heard nothing about acting ethically or morally and be like, oh, there's a starting point. But on the other hand, currently the audiobook that I'm listening to, 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, and honestly, there are plenty of things that I'm hearing about in this book that I'm like, well, I will actually avoid doing that for various reasons. And but similarly, there's some things that I might have been tempted to do that, after considering what this book brings up about, hey, here are some of the historical consequences of letting this take precedent over that, I'm like, oh, I need to watch that, because yeah, I don't want to end up like this historical guy here, right? So, to wrap things up on just an initial look at that Onan story, because again, we'll find reasons to revisit it. That is what the story is about. The story is not about bodily fluids. The story is about familial and social duties, and about choosing to live up to those or choosing to shirk them. And again, I think that you might even almost want to throw in the word, quote, legitimate, in the sense of not literal legal law, but in the law of whatever principle of action that you're applying to your own self, deciding how you are going to act and speak in your own life. That's what I'm saying, is that you really do have, and again, there are multiple elements to the story. I'll kind of foreshadow and say that when I talk about the story again in the future, what I actually am planning on talking about really is going to be um, more about stewardship and productivity and whatnot. So anyway, like I said, this time through, initially through the story, hope you guys had a good time. Hopefully you heard some ideas you hadn't heard before, and I will catch you later. Take care. Thanks for taking the time.